Hey everyone, my name is Robel, and this is a philosophical discussion. Now, for this video, I wanted to take a look at an unjust law, not any particular law, but rather the overall dilemma in correcting such a problem. I wanted to take a look at two people who have come up with arguments on different sides on how to go about fixing such a wrong. The first being Abraham Lincoln, and the second being Martin Luther King Jr. Two amazing orators, two amazing people who accomplished much in their lives. So, prior to Lincoln becoming president, he was an amazing lawyer and senator in Springfield, Illinois. He accomplished much there, but most of that tends to get overshadowed by his legacy as a president. It's there in which much of his idea of what the rule of law is and how it should be practiced comes from. Now, I'm going to take my liberties with assessing Lincoln's argument. Rather than drawing from one source, I'm going to look to a few of his speeches and essays that he's written. So Lincoln begins his argument not by, defending an unjust law or the very nature that an unjust law cannot appear, but the fact that, there were great men who established this country and gave their lives to creating the institutions that we have today, and to trample over the current laws just because you feel as though they're unjust, or just because they, currently have no merit or basis, is to trample on the very great men who created this country. They structured these laws as to, create something that would last a lifetime, and not anything that could be assumed would be irrelevant in any point in time. The laws were created to protect the liberties, to ensure the rights of every citizen. As we grow, things will always change, and that might cause us to abandon some of our old traditions for that of the new. As a result, what comes about is a lag in the laws in place, or an unjust law. But that doesn't mean you should resolve to go about and break the law that's in place. That doesn't mean you should protest your government or riot or do anything to justify such a wrongful, law that's in place. No, 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 no. You should go and support your government. It took time to build this country. It took time to build those laws, and it's always going to take time to correct those laws. So you should work with your country and try to correct what's, unjust, but not against it. If you protest and revolt your government, it's only gonna, look negative upon you. There's a great quote by him that says, "The best way to get a bad law repealed is to enforce it strictly." And it's a great point that he's making right here. And a good example of this is when Walmart a few years back had a rule in place that said that if you could find a better price anywhere on any of their products, they would match it. And what people did was, on Amazon, they would post up a product, a PS4, for $100, and at the time it was for 400 and some change. And what happened was they would go to the retailer, show them this price, and say, "Now you have to match it," and they did. And this happened for a weekend, and hundreds of people ended up paying less than a fourth of what it was costing. But eventually, Walmart corrected that loophole by the end of the weekend, and that's the idea that Lincoln is trying to convey, that it will get noticed and that people will obviously work to correct these issues. His argument doesn't even stop there. He goes even further and elaborates on why it's important to follow the law. He gives a great hypothetical argument. Let's assume there is an unjust law out there. Let's say there's something that bothers you to your core, so much so that you decide, "I've had enough. I'm going to the streets, I'm going to the government, I'm going to City Hall, and I'm going to protest." You protest. You bring your friends with you and other people that feel the same way about the law as you. So you protest and you petition your government to change it, but nothing happens. They remain the course, and you get fed up. Now you decide, if this government doesn't want to change its laws for me and, fix an injustice that's occurring right now, then I've had enough. It's not a government that's supporting me. So you and your friends decide you're going to destroy property. You're going to go and riot and start an uprising and destroy other parts of the town. Now I ask you, do you think your government is just going to look to you and say, "Man, we were wrong. We have to change this law"? Of course not. Nothing good has ever come from appeasement. Just look to World War II. Your government's just going to look at these protesters as a bunch of hooligans or bandits who are trying to destroy their own government. They don't honestly see how, politics works. It's a process. Even more so, it gives them ammunition to enforce the very law that you want replaced. It only forces them to think that that law is there to keep these hooligans in their place. So Lincoln's argument is beautifully written, and it establishes many, pivotal points as to why you should follow the law, why you should work with your government as opposed to against it, why you shouldn't protest, and why you have to be patient. Nothing ever comes like this. Things take time. Laws are these delicate things that, will affect millions of people. So you cannot be quick to create something, just like you cannot be quick to change something.
And whether any of you or anyone else knows it, I know I need this. This amendment is that cure. We're stepped out upon the world stage now, with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilt to afford us this moment. Now! And you grousel and heckle and dodge about like pettifogging Tammany Hall hucksters. See what is before you. See the here and now. That's the hardest thing. The only thing that accounts. Abolishing slavery by constitutional provision settles the fate for all coming time. Not only of the millions now in bondage, but of unborn millions to come.
Lincoln presents a valid argument as to why it's important to follow the rule of law, why you should be patient with your government. But opposite of him stands King, who disagrees with many of his points. King is remembered for being the civil rights leader. Outside of that, he was a pastor, humanitarian, and activist, a powerful speaker that could make you gravitate towards him. He was a renowned orator, and yet one of his most iconic moments was never heard but read, that being a letter from a Birmingham jail. It's within this piece that King establishes the merits behind protesting and brings about the call to action for those still hesitant. More importantly, the letter was addressed to the ministers, pastors, and other clergymen who chose to ignore the plea for help, deciding rather to wait for the courts to make their decision. King begins his letter with one of his most significant lines: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." This stands to be the overall theme of his letter. By this point, King asserts that you cannot stand behind any unjust law, as they sewed the fabrics of tragedy, a garment, as he points out, which covers us all. For King, protesting serves to be the tool to repair injustice, to engage with politicians and government officials, and to awaken the inner consciousness of the masses who cannot see the problems at hand. Protesting allows for a minority to be heard by the majority. He quotes St. Augustine when he writes, "An unjust law is no law at all." And with this, he essentially gives ground for his protesting, advocating the necessity for change rests on those who seek to break the very laws that remain to be biased. One of the fundamental points behind Lincoln's argument was that laws take time to change, and while it may be difficult to accept and follow any unjust law, one must work with their government in correcting these problems. King makes a point of addressing that time is neutral, rather arguing that it is what people do with time that can either be destructive or constructive, and for King, protesting stands to be constructive. He elaborates on this point by addressing two problems that come about from being patient. The first of which addresses those who believe that King should wait, that he should not protest but rather be patient for the courts to make their decision, a problem King felt only brought frustration. King's fight was against segregation and the Jim Crow laws in the South. He explains the issue of waiting for change in a powerful section within the letter. "When you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she cannot go to a public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority begin to form in her little mental skies, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness towards white people. When you have concocted an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, 'Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?' then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait." Furthermore, he addresses why one must protest when he states, "Lambanly, it is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture, but as Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us, groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. And it's a powerful point that he makes. For King, patience when it comes to injustice is a cruel path to follow, and while much can come about from change over time, this does not happen at the hands of inaction. The second is a response to his nonviolent protesting, an aspect King believed was a necessity in bringing about true change. While many believed he was inspired by Gandhi and his successful fight against the British rule within India, this is not the case. In fact, it was Reinhold Niebuhr, Paul Attila, and Henry David Thoreau that crafted King's belief on civil disobedience. King believed that protesting helped notify the masses of the injustices that loomed about. Furthermore, it was the mere fact that they accepted the punishment of the crimes they committed that made nonviolent protesting powerful. But this could only go so far. King warned his readers that eventually nonviolence could transform into violence. It's important that people see the problems of today in order to fix them and avoid the possible mayhem of tomorrow. King believed that injustice of any kind seeks to harm. The result of this harm will eventually seek out retaliation. This is a fear of the future if patience is had.
Thousands of people came to Selma, aroused by Sunday's brutal acts exacted by officials of the city of Selma and the state of Alabama. I felt if I had not led the march, pent-up emotions and inattentions would have led to an uncontrollable, retaliatory situation, a violent situation on both sides.
It's an important point that King makes, arguing that being patient is not the problem, it's how long one can stand behind an unjust law that matters. King states, there comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. Nonviolent protesting is only the sentiments of anger shown in peace, and while many might be displeased by the method of action, there are those who believe that the rights and liberties should be taken by force. This is an eventuality if they, the protesters, are not heard. For King, protesting nonviolently comes with an absolute respect for the law, as it demonstrates that those who are willing to break it are also willing to accept its punishment. One of the final points he makes with defending protesting doesn't come within his letter, but rather during an interview he gives. He states that history favors those who are willing to defend their rights at the behest of a biased government. To this day, we look to those who participated in the Boston Tea Party as heroes, not villains. We are in good company. I highly recommend reading this letter. It's a powerful stance against both injustice and inaction. King gives many valid reasons for his defense of protesting a government. Looking at both arguments, though, it's difficult to position one against the other. While being patient is important, Lincoln makes a drastic misstep in assuming the government will naturally work to correct its errors. What would be the world of today had not Lincoln existed? I can safely assume it would be drastically stark, and yet it took a man like Lincoln to put the weight of a country against himself in order to push the 13th Amendment through. So there's grounds to say that government works, but that tends to rest on the individual at the helm. At the same time, protesting can't solve problems. In fact, its only merit is to cause problems in hopes of change. With many people, the issue of rebelling against your government, regardless of the fact that it may be peaceful or nonviolent, feel as though it accomplishes nothing. If we look to the civil rights movement, their effect on the country and society as a whole has taken years to accomplish, well past King's death. It took years before schools became desegregated and even longer before employers began to give jobs of equal merit to those of diverse backgrounds. Even more so, we could still see the residual effects of hatred and racism today, though to a far lesser extent. So again, that isn't to say that King's method of nonviolent protesting is useless, it only means that it can take decades before we see any real progress. When we look at our government today, we can see the strands of politics strangling progress. It becomes difficult to see change when money plays a major role in our political institutions. It is money that provides politicians their resources to get reelected, and it is money that influences their decisions. Money and politics is not a good combination. In many ways, our system tends to feel more rigged against the masses than it once did long ago. The reality of today shows us that we can no longer rely solely on our government for change. It is a mutual effort between the people and their politicians. Knowing these two sides and understanding the world of today, who do you stand with when it comes to an unjust law? Or better yet, what do you believe is the best method for removing an unjust law? Thanks for watching. This is my first video. I hope you like what you saw. Please like and subscribe. I'll be coming out with more videos and content like this in the future, so please tell me what you think in the comment section. And until next time, everyone, peace.
I'd rather people be upset and hate me than be bleeding or dead.